Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome back to another episode of the Byword Show. So glad you're here today. Today's going to be a fun one because I have my friend Mallory Henderson with us, and I just adore her. We have been connecting over the past few months, and I just absolutely had to have her on the show to share with you guys because what she is doing with her business Workwell is just absolutely incredible. So, Mallory, for those who don't know you yet, would you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yes. Hi, guys. I am super happy to be here. First of all, Hannah, thank you. I'm honored and I love doing this. And I feel like it's just kind of having coffee because it literally is. Or are you having matcha, right?
I'm actually having a smoothie today.
Oh, cheers. Okay. I love it.
I know.
So my name is Mallory. I am a business owner. I have been for over a decade now. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I just moved from Amarillo to McKinney onto some land. We're building a farmhouse. And I don't know. I don't think I can call myself a homesteader. I'm like a faux homesteader, like doing 98% of the things probably wrong. But ask me in 5 years and maybe maybe I'll be able to share some sort of valuable information on that. But anyways, that's kind of what my life looks like right now. I started in business as a photographer and it's just kind of evolved from there and has been a journey for sure, but such a good one. And honestly has made me just the woman that I am, the mom that I am. I'm so grateful for business and super passionate about just breathing life into other women who have big dreams and big ideas, but aren't necessarily super sure on how to make those things happen. So that's kind of the very short spiel of what I do.
I love it so much. And I feel like there's such a huge need for that because I know for me, when I first started my projects and my business, I felt so clueless. So I love that you have gone and just created this kind of blueprint for other women. So, when you were in the beginning stages of starting your business and, going on this journey, what were some of the challenges that you faced when you were getting started?
Oh man. I love that question because it's very raw and very real. And whenever I read this earlier, I was like, oh my gosh, so many things. Like I remember, and like I said, I started as a photographer, but I feel like this applies to across the board. Like any business that you start, first of all, like the hump of getting over this imposter syndrome, I think most of us have it, whether we have like significant training in the field that we're trying to, start a business in or not. Like we as women, I feel like we face a lot of challenges, in terms of like really believing that we can do the things that God has set out before us. And so for me, it was a lot of, and you'll hear me say this a lot, kind of getting over this hump and learning how to shed the shame in my business before I really started like actually doing the things in my business because my mindset was such an obstacle for me for so long. And so I feel like that was the first huge obstacle. And then just kind of getting into this area of like, okay, how do I reach my people? Like, how do I reach the person that I'm really trying to talk to? And how do I clarify my message in a way that like gets, those people to come hang out in my community? What does that look like for me? And then monetizing, right? Like we have an idea and I'm a dreamer. I feel like you probably are too. Yeah, so we can sit in a room and say like, okay, we're going to be making $1 million by next year, and this is how, right? But like, then we also need like the very tangible like monetization pieces to make things successful and sustainable. And so for me, those were the three huge pieces that were really scary for me that I had to really work through and was able to work through in my photography business. And then it kind of just morphed from there. I laid photography down for many reasons and was just like, you know what? Like, I just built a really successful business and I know how to do it now. And my dream and my goal, like, would be to just pour into women and help women do the very same thing. So that's kind of how it was born. And those are the things that I really struggled with in the beginning.
I love that. And I love that you share so openly about that because I feel like what woman hasn't faced imposter syndrome or shame or felt like I don't know what I'm doing in the process, And I'm just so grateful that you are so willing to share what has helped you and like the steps that you've taken that helped you be successful. And I think there's so many pieces of this that I just love that you not only combine the process of business with mindset and the shame piece, which I feel like is rarely talked about in when it comes to business, especially women in business, but also the piece about like the what doing what God wants us to do, like what he's called us to do, our purpose, like it's one and the same in the business world. And I love how you've made that connection.
Thank you so much. I love that you love it, because sometimes, again, like we have to get out of our head and we're like, okay, are other people going to need this? Like, is this the thing that other people are going to need? But I have learned now, after coaching hundreds of women, like it really is like the mindset piece is, for, in my opinion, before you go out and start something, like that is so important. It is so important. And it's not just mindset. Obviously it's heart, and kind of getting to the inside of like, okay, what are we believing about ourselves, and whose power are we walking in? Because right now, in our culture, and I know that you have seen this, I'm sure, even within Christian circles of women who are pursuing business, I think that it can be very tempting to step into this thing where like we're stepping into quote unquote our power, and like what what we want to do, and we've somehow made it all about us, when in reality, like if we can figure out how to step out of that and into the power of Christ, like wow. I mean, honestly, some of these, I listen to women who have these huge ideas that could literally change the world, and I'm like, yes, like all we need to do is get you out of like, don't be in the mindset where it's all on you. This is not all up to you. This is not about you. And I mean that in a very loving way, but like, if we can learn how to step out of that and into the power of Christ, what is God going to do with your business and with you in your life?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and I feel like taking that approach is also so freeing because, yes, it's not up to us. It's not even about us. So, like, we just get to trust that God will show us the steps. And it's just, at least for me, it just relieves so much pressure because I have felt like as a woman, I have to hustle to keep up and I have to prove myself and I have to work extra hard to like be visible and get my message out into the world and like, feel qualified or whatever. And it's just, I love that as believers, we have the option and the opportunity to partner with God on our dreams and on our purpose and on our passions. And so that is incredible. I love that that's what you teach. So I would love to circle back around to the shame piece because, like I said, I feel like this is something that's rarely talked about when it comes to our purpose, when it comes to our work and our business. Why do you think so many women struggle with shame? Like, where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I love this question. And honestly, I've thought so much about this. And I think that we could probably do like an entire podcast on the answer to this question. But, there are a couple of reasons. I think the obvious, probably most obvious reason is just the environment of our culture and where things are with social media and how much exposure. I mean, it's unnatural. Like, it's unnatural how much exposure we have to other women's lives and the details of other women's lives, right? And so I think, those of us who, I mean, I'm going to show my age real quick, but in high school, I didn't have Instagram, right? Like I think we had Facebook my senior year of high school. And so I did not necessarily grow up in that. But then I remember going to college and just being exposed to how everyone else was doing life. And you have these blueprints in front of you, and if we're honest with ourselves, we're looking at those blueprints a whole lot more, than we're necessarily digging into scripture or looking into our own heart and, sitting with real people in real community. And so I think that God, I think that he calls us in a very, very real and tender and honest way to kind of step out of that if we can, and like set some healthy boundaries for ourselves instead of just being on social media all the time, which is hard as a business owner. But I think a lot of it is born there. I think a lot of the shame is born in that place where we're staring at a screen and we're believing these things that are set in front of us as this is what it should look like. This is what I need to be doing. And these things are also very curated, aesthetically pleasing, you know, beautiful grids of other people's best moments. And so I think a lot of it starts there. And that's that's like the tip of the iceberg, to be honest with you. So, but
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I feel like we're just bombarded with all the voices, all the messages, all the things that we should be doing. It's exhausting. But you talk a lot about shedding the shame. I love that language. So, what has your process been in your own life? And now, when you teach other women to shake it off, to like break that shame cycle?
Yes. So this is so key. And this is something that has taken me years to learn. And I don't know how much you want me to go into my story, but I know that, for me personally, it looked like a lot of anxiety I struggled with after I got married. I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. And so I came from a place of growing up in the church, and, things were supposed to look really nice and really good, and we're supposed to kind of pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and I wasn't able to do that. And it was very, very, very hard few years. And so I was in a lot of counseling. I'm still in therapy. Highly recommend. Whether whether the wheels are falling off or you drive like a Bentley, I don't care. Like, you need to go see a counselor because it's so helpful. So helpful. Anyways, one of my counselors, I will never ever be able to thank him enough for this, but he gave me this tool. And it was actually totally in regards to my marriage. But I took it and I kind of shifted. I realized you can apply this to life in so many different ways. And he basically said, like, you have two cycles, right? Like, you have like a pain cycle, and then you have a healing truth cycle. And so whenever you are, arguing with your husband or whatever, you're responding out of pain. You're in your pain cycle, right? And we want to get you from your pain cycle over to the truth. And so I did this in my marriage for years, and it changed my marriage. And then I started to realize I can do this in my relationship with myself. Like, I have these thoughts, as I'm building my business or whatever it necessarily, in friendship, whatever it looks like for you. And I have these thoughts that I know are not obedient to Christ, that I know are not truth, right? And they're rooted in shame. And so I'm able to take these thoughts captive and make them obedient to Christ and walk then in my truth cycle. And over time, like, it's not like, I think some people are like, well, Mallory, so do you just live in like this beautiful truth all the time and you never struggle with mindset at all? And that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, I literally go from my shame cycle to my truth cycle 25 times a day. Like, every day, like, I have a thought, and then I have just trained myself and disciplined myself to say, okay, I see this. Is this truth? Can I believe this feeling that I'm having right now? And I think that we have been taught in a lot of ways that feeling always equals truth, and that is not true. That's not biblical. Like, the heart can be very deceptive. And so learning that and being able to say, you know what, my feelings are not always truth. I can honor them and I can recognize them and I can talk through them. But I need to understand, like, is this truth or is this not? And if it's not, understanding how to say, okay, it's not truth, but what is the truth? And then step into that truth and take that on as my identity. And in my world, that truth is biblical, and that truth is who Christ is and who I am because of Christ. And so learning how to do that, that's a very short version. We go over that a lot, like within my mentorship and things like that. And that takes a lot of time. And I mean, I've hosted summits where, like, we literally spend multiple days in a room going over how to get from our shame cycle to our truth cycle and what that looks like for each individual woman. And it's a lot, but if you can figure that out and you can kind of use that tool to your advantage and figure out how to get from, this is what I'm believing about myself, this is what I'm feeling in this moment, but this is the real truth, and this is what I'm going to choose to step into, it will change your life. It really will.
That is so good. I love that. And I love that you talk about how it really is just this daily, I mean, multiple times a day choice to come back to truth, and like knowing who you are is such a good way to help break the shame cycle. Cause I feel like a lot of shame too. And it's like you said, it's lies that we're believing about ourselves. And a lot of times it's driven by our emotions and what we're feeling. And it's so easy to get off track when we just let our emotions run the show. But I mean, like, it's easy to. It's really easy to do that.
And it's very countercultural too. Like, it's like, And right now in our culture, it's very much about how you feel, and it's very much about what your feelings tell you to do, and that can get really dangerous really fast. I mean, if we're not living by a very clear, scriptural, and that's not, I don't mean that to sound legalistic or like we're supposed to do all the right things at all. Obviously, there's like an enormous, beautiful amount of grace in all of this. But I do think that we've lost a sense of discipline in kind of controlling our feelings and our thoughts. So,
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is the discipline piece. God has given us, and not just a set of rules, but like honestly, in his love for us, just some guidelines, like a roadmap on how to live in the freedom he's given us, live in the abundant life he wants for us, and live out our purpose without getting so stuck in the shame or all the things that can derail us and really just distract us from what he really wants for our lives. So I think that's such a key point. And I'm so glad you mentioned Work Well, because you have just launched this brand new mentorship. I'm a part of it. So I'm biased. Like I think it's the best thing ever. I am just loving it so far. But would you just talk to us a little bit about this program that you've developed and what you're doing now, like to help other women go through this process, not only in their life but in their business?
yes. So, like I said, I was a business owner, photography, that kind of morphed and grew. And I guess it was 2019, I finally was like, okay, I'm going to take the leap and like build this out and build this curriculum and do this thing that I felt called to do that I've been scared to do. And so I did, and I built it out. And in 2020, when the world fell apart, I literally announced a in-person summit. I think we announced it in like February, and this was 2020, right? And so I'm like about to do the like biggest thing I've ever done in my career, and anyway, so love that for me. But it was actually very successful because of, I don't know, the Lord. It had nothing to do with me, I don't think, because I was a mess that whole year. I was like, how are we going to navigate this? But anyway, we ended up meeting together in a lodge in South Lake Tahoe. I think there were like 25 of us. And all of these women came from different places. I mean, literally, we had like a beekeeper, we had an author, we had people in network marketing. Like it was across the board, right? And we just kind of, after all of us having been very secluded that whole year, we hadn't been with other human adults. I mean, for me, my husband and I were with my son, who at the time was like 2. So it's like we were just hanging out with a 2-year-old for like months and months and months. So being in a room just with other human beings who were older than 2 years old was a blessing. But um, man, God moved in such a profound way. And I taught that curriculum. And literally, the curriculum is shedding the shame, clarifying your message, and monetizing your dream. And not being ashamed of the monetization piece. Because I think a lot of times we're like, well, God has called me to this. So it's like, it's not about like making money, like, right? Like we're like almost like want to just give it away for free. And that's kind of where I step in and say, listen, like there's nothing shameful about running a successful, sustainable business that's giving other people tools they need in order to succeed, to pursue, things that they need to pursue. And so anyway, we went through that curriculum over, I think, like a 4 or 5 day period. It was one of the most beautiful weeks of my whole life. And then we came back and I was like, okay, we're in a pandemic. Like we can try and continue to do this like in person, or I can turn this into something where more people are able to, access it. And I think the world, right, during that time was like, okay, how can we put everything online for our business to make it sustainable? Because things were just falling apart. And so I turned that curriculum into a online mentorship, and I released it to 50 people and said, okay, be brutally honest and critique this as much as you can. And we kind of took time after that to develop it and make it the way that it should be. And then I sat on it for about a year because we were in the middle of infertility and moving and all the things. And then a few months ago, I was like, okay, I know that it's time and I need to be faithful in this. And so last week, we actually launched the mentorship, and it's a 12-month mentorship. The summit was a $5,000 ticket, which is really scary and a lot for especially new business owners. And so I wanted to make it financially, I wanted to make it affordable. And so you can hop into the mentorship for $97 a month for 12 months, and then you're done. Or you can do like a one and done payment and save some money. But anyway, the point is that I wanted to make it affordable. I wanted to make it something where there's skin in the game, right? Like people are saying like, okay, how many of us have bought a course for $27 or whatever, and then we literally have never looked at it. So I want women to go through the curriculum, right? And I want it to be something that really changes their business. And so that's what we do. We shed the shame. We go through that whole piece together, and then we clarify their message, and then we monetize. And I coach inside the community group, which I'm so excited to do. I have not like coached, in that way in a really long time, but we'll be coaching once a week on Fridays and throughout the year. And there's, I think you've dove in a little bit. There's like a 30-week devotional that was written by one of my very best friends, but it's all in regards to working well as a woman who's also pursuing Christ and building a business that's going to be sustainable and is going to honor the Lord and honor your family and honor yourself and others well. And so that is the gist of what it is. And I just couldn't be more excited. I'm so excited.
I feel the exact same because I felt like for so long that it was almost like this shame because I was so passionate about my work, because I love to be able to do what I do, like my passions, all these projects, these things that I'm doing. And for so long, I would hear these messages in the church about like the Proverbs 31 woman is a stay-at-home mom and a homemaker, and she like bakes bread every day. And I was like, I love that, but also like I feel called to the business world and to be a mom, and I feel like some women I've had conversations with, they feel like it's very one or the other. Like, okay, if I choose to pursue my career, then I'm sacrificing being there for my family. Or if I choose to just sacrifice this season of 18 plus years to be a present mom, then I'm sacrificing my dream life, and pursuing the things I want to do. And I mean, you're a mom too, so you know what it's like to be navigating both. And obviously there are seasons where your work requires more attention or your family or your health requires more attention. But I think it's so beautiful that you are showing women that we can do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And honestly, there is so much purpose in doing the work as well. Like whether you're a stay-at-home mom, that's beautiful if that's what you're called to do. Or if you're in the work world, or if you're doing a combination of both, like there's a way to do it where God is still in the middle of it all. I just love that so much.
I love that you brought that up, because that is something that for me, that is actually a place that where my shame was like abundant. So I grew up with a mother who is my best friend today, but she is just mama through and through and through. She did not want to do anything else. She wanted to have her babies and love them well, and then that was her world. And so that's kind of the mother that I grew up with. And so whenever I realized, oh my gosh, there's all these things I want to do, including being a mom, I felt so much guilt and so much shame. And I love that you said it doesn't matter, if you are called to be a mom 100% of the time, and you're not called to also pursue business, that's beautiful if that's what God has called you to. And so for a long time, I resented my mom because she didn't show me what it could have looked like. But God has worked on my heart so much in helping me realize it truly is, it's an individual thing that God has called each woman to in a very different way. And it's going to look very different. And I think for me, the biggest thing is that I not only do I want women, and this is key, to know that they can do both. I want them to know that they can do both very well, that they can do both and still exist in peace, have a peaceful home, feel free in their work, not feel completely overwhelmed. There was a season in my life where I laid photography down, and I had just had my son. So we were missing that income that we were used to. And my husband was working. We had just gotten back from working overseas, and it was just a very weird time. And so I knew I needed to be making money, but I was not going to do photography. So I had to figure it out. And I jumped into a network marketing business, like many of us have, right? And I worked my actual tail off. And I think I made $500 a month for like, which was great, but like the amount I was working and I was juggling a newborn. And I just remember in that season feeling like this is not sustainable. This is not freedom for my family. And that's really preached, in that network marketing sphere. And I love network marketers. I have no issue. Like I have a network marketing business. It's one of my, income streams. So I love that. And there's no shade, but I think that it can be done in a way that teaches women, you just need to hustle, short-term sacrifice, long-term gain, put it all aside, work in the cracks and the nooks of your day. And so I did that, and I exhausted myself, and I put myself and my family in a detrimental place of, I can't do this. I can't do both. Like I'm falling apart. And so God, through that season, kind of taught me like, hey, like, first of all, there's smarter ways to do business, and that you can do both, but you don't need to sacrifice your peace for it. Right. And so doing both well is my big thing, is like, if you're called to both, yes, you can, but like, let's make it and build it in a way where you're not going to lose yourself in the process, or your peace. Right.
Yep, absolutely. I love that so much. So, talk to us about like what this really looks like on a day to day for you. Like practically, what does it look like to start making these changes? And, just are there any practices or things that have been something that you've kind of put in place to where you can protect your peace and be there for your family and also grow your business?
Yeah, I love that question so much. So, like, on a practical level, and this is something that I love talking about, and I love teaching, because I think a lot of times we can get on these podcasts and it's very fluffy, and it's like, okay, but now what do I do? And so I am very much all about like building structure and creating systems in your business that are going to serve you super well. Having a funnel that's going to, like, the way that I teach, and this is a very practical thing, and we'll get into a few more different things, but the way that I teach is I essentially sit in front of you, and I want to know exactly what you feel called to. I want to know what you're pursuing, and I want to figure out a way to get you to consistent 10K months, like, for as many years as you want, right? Without having to bust your booty, right? And that doesn't mean you're not going to work hard, but you're not going to be sustainable, right? And so we sit down and we build out an actual funnel for you to grow that actually works, where you're not feeling like you have to get on Instagram every single day. I used to get on Instagram with my face every day. I did the reels, I did all the things I needed to do. And yes, there was growth, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's seasons for that, right? But I don't think anybody should feel like that's what they're dependent on in order to get paid. And what I see a lot of the time is women working so hard and doing the things that they've been told to do, and they're not bringing anything home for their families. And to be totally honest, it's bullcrap, because they have something beautiful to offer. And my job, and what has worked well for me, is to sit down and say, we're going to create a system that serves us really, really well, where you're going to be bringing in the money that you have earned for your family. And so a lot of that is very practical, and we go through that in the mentorship, what that looks like to build out a funnel, to have an email list, to grow without having to pay an enormous amount to ads and things like that. But then another piece of building a business that's sustainable, that honors Christ, is accountability. That's like one of the biggest things for me, is accountability with the people in my real life, in my community, who know that I'm a business owner, who know that, this is what I do. It's when people ask you what you do in the real world, and you're like, I do the things on the Instagram. Like, I don't know how to share what I do. Like right now we're building a house. And so we live with my in-laws, and we've been here for 9 months, and I've been married to their son for 10 years, and I still don't think they could tell you what I do. Like, they're so confused. They're like, okay, so they don't, they just don't really get it. But anyways, it's about being able to let people into what you actually do and say, hey, it's very tempting for me sometimes to bury myself in work. it's very tempting for me sometimes to say no to this and this and this, in my real life, because I am building this and this and this. And so building out community and being fully committed to community and real community where you're willing to show up really messy and you're willing to show up in your sin and you're willing to say, hey, these are the things that I need you to look out for me. Like, if you see that I'm not at community group, 3 weeks in a row because I'm launching something or whatever, that's not a good reason. Like, I want people to hold me accountable. So that's one way, there are so many ways. And I think it doesn't have to look super spiritual necessarily. I am going to be totally very deeply honest with you and say that I don't pray before I work every day. Like, that's not necessarily what happens or what my life looks like every day. I don't sit at my computer before I open it. And I mean, sometimes I do, but I don't think there's necessarily a perfect blueprint for it, but just being willing to open your hands and say, okay, God, do what you want to do with this. If you told me that it would look like this for me, 5 years ago, whenever I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to do the thing, I would have been very confused about my life because this is not really what I had envisioned. But God has, I feel like, been able to kind of mold it into what he knew all along it needed to be. And so just the willingness to kind of hold your hands open as you grow your business is huge.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I just love that because not only is it setting an example for other women, but for our children, I feel like to watch us work that way, because I had a similar experience with my mom. She was a stay-at-home mom and she's a wonderful mom. But I've just seen how busy and stressed she was with the day-to-day things. And now that we are both older and we have a relationship, there are times when we have a conversation and my mom is saying to me, I don't know what to do with my life. Or, we all still have those questions no matter where we're at in the journey. But how cool is it that we now have an opportunity when we're the moms to show our kids God can be in everything. He wants to show up in every area of our lives that we'll invite him into. And so even in the messy middle of the process, which is frankly pretty often for me, 90% of the time, he still shows up and makes every single step so beautiful and meaningful, and no part of the process is wasted that way.
Yes, I feel like that's such wisdom. And if we can hold on to that, no part of the process is wasted. I love that because God doesn't waste it. And he won't, and he's faithful. And if he has called you to it, he will provide in the midst. And I think, this is kind of a side note, but women who are building businesses while also carrying babies, on their hips, are, there is no, that is superpower. That is not, we are in the trenches, right? I have a 5-year-old now, and so I'm kind of out of the babyhood stage for now. And I just remember whenever he was so little and dependent, so dependent on me. I just want to sit and honor those women because it is not easy at all. And it's scary, right? So scary. So that's just a unique, but he won't waste any of it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we go, I would love to know, is there anything you would want to say to a woman who's just feeling stuck in her shame and just feeling like she's not able to move forward or doesn't know how?
Oh, so many things. But probably most important is that she's not her shame, right? Her shame does not define her. And her shame is a lie. It's not that it's not worthy of being recognized, right? Because I think sometimes we just want to hide from our shame and not deal with it. I think that it's important that we face it, that we bring it out into the light. And that's what I would say, is that your shame is most powerful in the dark. And that is where it's going to grow the most ugly bumps and legs and grow into this gross thing that should never have been there in the first place. If we can be brave enough to pull our shame out into the light by saying to someone, this is what I'm believing. These are the thoughts I'm having. This is what I'm thinking about my life. I don't care who it is. If it's your husband or your partner or your counselor or your best friend, getting it out into the light and out of the darkness is your very first step to seeing something beautiful change in your heart and in your life. Because when we turn the lights on, things are just less scary. I mean, literally last night, Judah has gone through this season of wanting to sleep with mom and dad. He creeps down the hallway almost every night, or has until a few nights ago. And he sneaks into bed, and we don't realize he's in bed until all of us have cricks in our neck and are like, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable, right? And so last night, I was laying down with him, and I said, you've done a really good job of sleeping in your bed. Like, what do you think has changed for you? And I had turned on a light behind him, like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 nights prior, and said, like, there's nothing here. You see, like, you're looking around, and like, because his big thing is ghosts. He's like convinced that there's ghosts in his room. And I've turned the light on the other night and have done so a few times before bed and said, there's nothing here. Like, there's nothing here. And the light is on. And like, he looked around and was like, there's really not. Like, there's really nothing here. And so when we're able to flip the light on in our own, in our own hearts and in our own lives, when we see these things and they become very scary when they're in the dark, and then we flip the light on and we let others in, and we give others opportunity to speak truth into our hearts and to say, hey, I love you, but this is not truth. And this is not who you are or what you are. And we're not going to believe this anymore. It's so much easier to just not be afraid and to step into the power of Christ. And that's when we surrender and we say, okay, I'm not going to believe that stuff anymore. I'm not going to be in that anymore. And again, it's not something that happens and then you never deal with it again, right? You're flipping on the light, like I said, 20, 30 times a day, every day, but you've learned this tool to do it well, and you do it, you show up, and it's just a whole lot less scary. So that's what I would say. You're not your shame. And the first place to start is by turning the light on.
I love that. That's so good. I mean, all of this is so good. I feel like we could just go on and on about this, but thankfully you have the Work Well mentorship where people can actually go and get the full scoop and the deep dive on all of this. So would you just tell everybody where they can connect with you, get access to that mentorship and all the things?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at MalloryMorgan.co. I would love to hang out with you there. Hannah has a link that she can share. That's probably where I'd prefer you guys get the mentorship. And I have a 10K workshop. That's what I call it. And it's just a workshop to watch before you dive into the mentorship that helps you really understand what the investment is and why, it might serve you and whether or not it's in a great alignment with you. That's typically $27, but I've given that to Hannah to give to you guys for free. So please watch that. If nothing else, at the end of the day, if it's not for you, it will hopefully serve you in some capacity. I think it's like 30 minutes long. But you can start there. And then, like I said, come say hi on Instagram. That's really where I spend most of my time. But I would love to meet you guys and just interact.
Thank you so much. You guys absolutely need to go connect with Mallory. She's got so many incredible resources. Like I said, I'm in the mentorship right now and absolutely loving it. I would love it if you would come and join me. I'll make sure everything is linked for you guys. But seriously, Mallory, thank you so, so, so much for being willing to come and share your time and your story and your expertise with us. I just love everything that you're doing to show women a better way and a more fulfilling way to do work. So thank you so, so much.
Hannah, thank you so much. I'm so, so honored and grateful. I've been following you for so long and just love you so much, even though I've never met you in person. And I'm just grateful to have been here. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune into another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here, and I'm so thankful for your support. Don't forget to share a screenshot of this episode to let me know you were here. I can't wait to talk again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come hang out with me on Instagram, and remember, I am cheering you on.